You are fake news.
Sir.
Who controls mainstream media?
The most embarrassing leaked group chats.
This is scary.
Welcome to Simple Conversations with ASG.
Tell me, who is John Oliver Mason?
I, John Oliver Mason, am a journalist. I am a blogger, a poet, an author of fiction. I am a YouTube host, and I am a podcaster.
Man of many talents.
Mm-hmm. And I am also politically active in my ward in Philadelphia and in the labor movement of Philadelphia. I do what I can for the various causes I'm in.
What's annoying you this week, John?
Huh?
What's annoying you this week?
I'll take it. Yeah, we got for one thing, we got Elon Musk and his little dweebs playing with computers and trying to barge into these government agencies that actually do help the people of our country and try to break them down for what? Just so they can do it? I mean that the waste, fraud, and abuse excuse is nonsense. They just want to damage these programs. I myself am on get benefit from Social Security, the Veterans Affairs Department, Medicaid, and I'm not on Medicaid. I'm not on Medicaid, but millions of people in this country are. And it's like they don't know the consequences of what they're doing. They just want, it's a puke sponge just like go in and smash everything just so they can do it. But it must get these little punks.
I'm picking a fight with no more technology people. I had a tech talk with a software developer which sunk like a lead balloon because according to everyone on the internet I am an armchair psychologist, so I'm having a lot of fun in the tech industry at the moment. But hearing what you're talking about, breaking down systems and using technology, links quite nicely into what we're talking about today, which is we're going to get the truth behind the news. How much of it is true? How does a journalist work? We're gonna go old school with the news system. We're not doing this social media stuff anymore. So the first thing I want to talk about, which is anybody who is heavily on social media will understand a lot. In the last few weeks, there's been a lot of this leaked stuff that's come out. People have been talking about apparently there's steel rods made underneath the pyramids. That's what holds them up. There's been a lot of actors that have been in a lot of trouble lately with leaked audio and messages. So, thing that has been on my mind the most, because I'm a deeply curious person, I can't help but question everything. And you're the man that I need to send this question to because you've got a history in journalism. Where does this leaked information actually come from?
Well, I guess people try to have links to their stories to back their credibility up. Back there, like I said before, show the receipts, have a reliable source, back up what you say. Like that's what I do. I have this email newsletter that I call the Mason Missile. I put on my website, johnomason.com. And I often try to link what I say about certain topics and certain persons with links to reliable news sources, reliable historical sources to back up what I say. So, see, you have to be credible. You have to get your facts straight in journalism. You can't. You can't make stuff up, of course. That's it for now. That's it.
Yeah. So I know what you mean by you try and reference information and where you got it or how you built the story, but like on social media now, a lot of it is it's hit pieces. It's quite short and quick information. Get it out. It's almost like they just put out the headline without any context. So if these people are writing about figures in society or public figures that we all know, we see on the TV or we see on our screens all the time, this information that they break as breaking news or as exclusive, how much of that information is actually true and where do they get it from?
Well, a real journalist would get some background on the story, like hold off breaking the story until you get the information verified, and if they dare to sue, you can verify it, and you see if something is said to have happened, you have to check and see if it did happen. Break being the first out with a story is great, but you have you, the first job is to get your facts straight. You have to maintain your credibility. You have to be accepted as known as a reliable news source.
So, for example, if somebody was writing a story about something bad that someone did, would there ever be a point where they would maybe not conduct formal interviews, but they would ask people closely linked to the person about whether it happened or not, just so that they would, like you said, they'd have receipts for like legal backing more than anything.
Mhm.
Would that happen? Yeah.
Well, yes, you have to get your information close to the source. Like like if you say if you say the president did such and such, if you heard that news, you have to go double check with people on the president's staff and and to see it. Did he really say that? And then say and check it. See if you can check it out on your own. And then if you like I said, if you got your facts straight, then put it out.
Yeah, so they would almost have to stamp it with authenticity first.
Mhm.
So if they were sued legally, they could back it up.
All right, that's right. That's right.
So that obviously is the greatest, like the great framework, and that is the way to go about it. But there will be journalists that will just make stories up almost for the sake of it. Those like fake stories, I think we're all aware of fake news spreads really, really quickly. It almost spreads more than the real news. What drives someone to create a fake news story?
Well, maybe if it if the fake news stories try and be really hot and sexy and exciting, it's ratings. Like TV news shows are based on ratings. Everything on TV is based on ratings. Like who got the most ratings on at this time from what demographic?
Yeah.
And you have to, and you want your ratings go over the roof. And also there are certain news channels, I won't name them, that they call themselves news, but actually they're like propaganda outlets for certain interests. And you and they don't aim at the general public. Their audience is the people who share those same political views as does the network and the owner of the network and whichever politician or president or whatever the head of the network supporting. Do you want me to name names, or do you want me to?
No, I don't want any
Okay.
legal issues, but something you said there did perk a question in my mind. When you say, it is a lot of it's about ratings and how can we get the word talking more? Do you think in those news stations is ever a case of one of the executives sees somebody's big on TV, or they're very popular at the moment? Maybe they have something that's came out and it's done really well with the public, and they would maybe push their journalists to not fake a story, but almost get like a little tip of information and word it in a way that would sway the public opinion the other way, away from being idolizing this person to almost bringing them down.
Hmm. Well, yeah, yeah, that's been known to happen. I've read stories and I've seen in newspapers where a certain public figure is artificially puffed up, and they put all they make all these stories about the person. It's like like I said, the hot, sexy story of the hour. Like if the news media has a certain bias, if a network has a certain bias, they'll do might do the opposite. They'll do everything to slander uh, the person, and race and gender do enter into it. I mean, like sometimes it's been known to happen that if a is of a certain race, the network will judge that person more harshly based on racial stereotypes. And also with women, I mean, a male politician would be called demanding or forward thrusting, forward looking. A female politician would be called pushy or bitchy, that kind of thing. So we have to check the phrasing too, the phrasing of the story.
That was a topic I wanted to hit because I think everybody is aware that rumors start from something that is true, but it's been worded differently and passed on, and then worded differently again to the point where it's just a big lie. So when it comes to these news stories, like you said, there's a lot of opinions that play into how the story's released. How much of it is reliant on the wording, depending on what way it'll go? It could be information that it could be used as benefit. Like you said, like say a female politician done something good, but then someone's worded it as, maybe she pushed too hard on a pain point, or she was constantly like pestering somebody for information, things like that. How much does wording matter in these stories?
Indeed, it does. And there have been these instances where this big fat news story gets hyped by certain political interests, but you just got to do a little digging, and you see it was just either blown out of proportion to serve a certain interest, or just a story that just happened and wasn't so. And like,
So with this whole ratings kind of being at the forefront, I understand what you mean with that. I mean, the world's at a point where there's a desperate need for validation and attention constantly. So would you say that in the journalism world or in these networks, there is almost a blockbuster genre of story? Like if they got a little bit of information about a certain topic, that would be the thing they push the most. A way, maybe they would get information about good things that are happening in the world, but because this one thing's happened, they want to push that story the most.
yeah, it's been known to happen. Like, did you want me to reference a certain great media tycoon back in the past?
Go for it.
Yeah, William Randolph Hearst. I
William
mean,
Randall.
he owned several dozens of newspapers throughout the country, and he was all he wanted to do was go for spectacular, exciting stories. Like like he was really put like about in the late 18s. He was really pushing for the United States to annex Cuba, and there was a an indigenous liberation movement going on in Cuba. And it was always, and Hearst was always hyping or exaggerating some stories that showed the depravity of the Spanish administration in Cuba, and then there was, and the battleship Maine blew up in Havana Harbor, and that was given the United States an excuse to go to war with Spain to capture Cuba. But there was these calm research that said that the Spanish did not put a bomb underneath beneath the Maine. It most likely is that like a spark from the furnace flew into the coal bin and caught fire, that kind of thing. But they didn't. But they were. But so many people in the McKinley administration and Hearst, such as Theodore Roosevelt, who was Assistant Secretary of the Navy under McKinley, were all gung ho and just champing at the bit to invade Cuba, just so they could have a war. I mean, it was like there was this generation of young men that were upset because they missed out on the Civil War. And now they wanted their own war, and finally they got it. And when you think about it, uh, they're talking, all the news media that they were talking about the glory and valor of the heroics of the war, where war is young men coming home broken and damaged physically and mentally, if they come home at all. It means families losing loved ones, blood and death and disease ravaging the country. But the news, Hearst and the other news media of that era didn't mention that. They just wanted stories of valor and glory.
Yeah, they had their own agenda that they wanted to push.
Oh yeah, and Hearst's agenda and the McKinley administration's agenda was to go to war with Spain and be like the great European powers of that era. The European nations were getting big chunks of Asia and Africa to colonize them, and the United States didn't want to miss out on the whole imperialism game. They just wanted to have their own little bit of empire anywhere.
Do you think that still happens today where people have their own agendas and they'll almost use the media to push it in their favor to the point where there is no other side? It is just their agenda and you have to kind of accept it.
Well, has been known to happen, like with the Red Scares after the World Wars, and during the First World War, the Russian Revolution came in, was on, and the Bolsheviks took power in November of that year, 1917, and during and right after the United States participation in the war, there was a Red Scare to kind of crush all the radical movements of that era. Just excuse not I mean, to accuse them of taking German gold. It wasn't about finding saboteurs and traitors, but just an excuse to crush these movements like the Socialist Party under Eugene Debs or the IWW. Those were the main radical movements of the day, and it found an opportunity to come down on them. And the news media played along with that. And after World War II, there was the Red Scare about Stalin taking over the Eastern European countries and China and in China the nationalists lost to the communists in the Civil War, and there was this highly cultivated movement to uh, try to ferret out communists and again people who were uh, who were pushing a progressive agenda, what was then called a radical agenda, an agenda pushing civil and human rights forward. That was all considered communist, and the news media went along with that, along with the universities, and the Korean War was also played a role in it. And and af, and with Joe McCarthy's raving about communists in the State Department, and after the Korean War, and our participation in the Korean War ended, the Red Scare kind of faded, and and Joe McCarthy was shown to be this attention-grabbing hack, and but the damage was done, and the Red Scare was kind of faded, and there was propaganda about communists, but warning about communists however the hell you define them,
Do you
and
think that news media underestimate how powerful their opinion is? Like you said, there they ran with it. Do you think maybe they'd underestimated the fact that they ran with it, pushed it for it was leaning more towards it was going to be a war?
well, I, I think for a lot of times they did. Like Hearst knew that his media empire was so popular and had this enormous readership, and they Hearst papers always went for the big spectacular stories with just a smidgen of fact behind them. And so I guess they were. Hearst was conscious of the power of his papers and conscious of the effect they had.
Would you say maybe that competition between news media could push these agendas a little bit further? It's almost like you said, that Hearst knew this was the blockbuster, this was the story, the big story at the time. Do you think then maybe a different news media company could see someone writing a big blockbuster story and think we need to outdo them, and that could then cause even further problems for everybody?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's been known to happen. Like I said, these media corporations are corporations. They're billion-dollar corporations, and they're owned by other billion-dollar corporations. The way that ABC is owned by Disney, and how MSNBC and MSNBC, up until very recently, were were under the umbrella of Comcast.
Yeah.
And so of course, there would be this temptation to, by like the owning company CEO, to to pass an idea down to the CEO of the media outlet, and they in turn pass the word down to the editors. This is how I want it worded. It's been known to happen. It's like there's this classic story about the famous TV evangelist Billy Graham.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Oh yeah.
He was mentioned on a past episode, funny enough.
Oh yeah. And Graham was this young evangelist who was holding tent revivals in L.A. And he just hyped about, added on there the danger of communism, and then all of a sudden, Graham sees all these reporters and cameras aimed at him, and the story went that William Randolph Hearst, as he was decomposing in his mansion in San Simeon, heard about Graham and what he was doing, and he liked it, and he gave the order to his editors, puff Graham, like hype him, and a legend was born. So yes, the news media does have an effect, and always these corporate. It's unfortunate that these corporate moguls decide what's a story and what isn't. I have to say this. I have to say this. Example of this is Jeff Bezos. He owns the Amazon, on which I publish some of my works. so I'm sticking my neck out here. And the Whole Foods grocery chain, and MGM Studios, and the Washington Post. And last year, the editorial board of the Post decided to recommend Kamala Harris as a candidate to endorse. But all of a sudden, Bezos brings down the word that they would not endorse anybody. And a year later, Bezos gave the order that they would only publish editorials favorable to the so-called free market, whatever the hell that is. I mean, it's out and now, and I don't think Bezos was all that uh, afraid of Trump. I mean, Bezos is a billionaire supporting another billionaire who is supported by another billionaire. So, so, uh, so, hey, it's the same club. They're protecting each other.
Yeah. I also don't think that he meant any harm with it, Jeff. I genuinely think that he was trying to voice his opinion, but it's almost, there's this kind of theory of you can be the devil of your own success. I think that Jeff hasn't realized that because he is one of the most powerful and richest men on the planet, he's lost the ability to just have his own opinion. Everyone's going to think it's an agenda. And I do think that kind of not spooked him, but I think he wasn't really ready for it. But that has kind of made me think. You mentioned obviously that these news media networks are backed by a massive backer. It's always like you said, it's always $1 billion company. These big studios are constantly looking for news networks because they can get easy promotion. Do you think knowing that money is behind them and they have to produce to make that money worth it plays into the agendas they push? Maybe they push wrong agendas because they know it's going to get big hits.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It's been known to happen that if there's an article related to the recording industry, they would have at the site an advertisement for a chain of, say, record stores. And I remember back in the 70s, in these newspapers had the editorial section, and the Mobile Oil Company would place an ad along with the editorials, uh, passing itself as another editorial, as just one more looking like just another editorial, but it's really an ad complaining about regulation of the petroleum industry. And like, so, yeah, and advertisers play a big role. Like I show you, advertisers threatened with told advertising money if an unfavorable story came out. Yeah, the money does affect things.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but you mentioned obviously televangelists and stories breaking, and last year I had the pleasure of interviewing Pat Robertson's old bodyguard. You may remember him as a televangelist. He tried to run for president, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
I had a conversation with his ex bodyguard who he quickly left the campaign, and he tried to kind of go against Ralph Reed, who was heavily involved in the campaign. But he mentioned that at a time when he wasn't running for presidency yet, but he wanted to make his name in the political game, not just the televangelist world. Well, he had reporters and journalists on payroll, almost as employees, as saying, right, this is what I'm going to do next. Can you put the story out and almost expose it before it's happened, and then I'll follow through with it and I'll make this massive boom and everyone will talk about it? Is that common?
Well, I don't know how common it is, but it's definitely not journalism. Journalism is more like propaganda. I mean, were these supposedly mainstream journalists or just hired PR people for Robertson?
I never asked it too in depth because there was things I wasn't allowed to ask. But from what I know from doing some research after going away, they worked for networks. So they almost fed the information lightly into the network and someone took it and ran. Almost like what you mean with people pushing their agendas. They put it out there and then news stations, they run with it because they know it's going to get hits.
Yeah, yeah, that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate practice. I mean, uh, you do have to get close to the sources of the story to find out what's going on. But but still, as a paradox, there has to be a bit of distance to remember you don't work as a paid propagandist for this politician or this billionaire. You're a journalist and you work for the newspaper. You have to get the word out accurately and not try to hype this person's propaganda or agenda. In fact, in the second George W. Bush administration, I hope I'm not changing things around.
Go for it.
These ad agencies would have would put out videos that looked like actual stand-ups of TV reporters out in the field interviewing people that would be favorable of this or that industry or corporation or politician. And they would pass it on to smaller market TV stations to, because they were small stations, they didn't have a lot of money, so they passed these videos on to the TV stations as real news stories. But it was just a propaganda from an ad agency, and and I that was a terrible thing. That was terrible. I mean, it's, it, there's a saying that there's starting to be you can't do the blur anymore between a real news story and what's excessive hype, and you still so that makes journalism, actual, real, in your face, get the facts straight journalism, more important. So you can be properly informed and make intelligent decisions and vote accordingly as citizens.
How do you feel about the news world now, where it seems to be heavily on social media and anybody with a few thousand followers can almost break a story? How do you feel about it now? Do you feel journalism's kind of been hard done by with the whole social media thing?
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. I mean, like the so-called podcasters or media influencers, a lot of them are just downright racist and neo-fascist, anti-Semitic, and they just inspire the worst instincts in people. And they also bring up a lot of misinformation, a lot of misinformation, to put it nicely, like about COVID. Some of these influencers, I would call them liars. They mis mis misinformers, I would call them. They would talk about stuff that such lies as COVID's not so bad, it's just a common cold, and drink this horse medicine, it'll cure your COVID. All that nonsense. I believe that slowed down, and the fact that we had a president that was talking just like that, I mean, didn't made it worse. The I believe that slowed down any efforts to cure COVID, cure COVID, find a cure for COVID, find find a vaccine, protect people from the spread of the virus, and so and it makes me suspicious. Maybe there's some big money behind hyping these guys, pushing this deranged agenda, this neo-fascist, racist, quack medicine agenda.
Do you think it would make sense for, like you said in the past, news media would push the agendas? Do you think it makes sense now for, I don't like calling them influencers because they don't really influence, and when they do, it's not usually good, but You think maybe then people that are pushing these agendas would rather pay these influencers to push the agenda for them because they know they've got bigger platforms and let's face it, they know how to get the attention.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. That, like I said, there's some money behind it, hyping up these guys, and they want to push not just an agenda, but these crack medicines. Like you remember Alex Jones?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, along with his rantings and ravings, he also pushed these quack medicines like the milkshake that's made from human bones or something, or to increase your virility, and these mega vitamins. I that's that's a now these guys are an outlet for these Junko products.
Yeah. They're being paid to endorse them.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't put it past them.
So it seems like it can be quite common for stories to be fake now, more than ever almost. But for the people that do kind of want to find real stories and they don't want to believe everything they see online, what would you look for in a story today that would scream to you, this is a fake story?
Mm. What was those? Hard to say. Uh, well, that's just it. I mean, it can be kind of dependent on whatever news sources you have access to. And you don't know if they're talking talking the real story or not. But maybe it's been said that's a part of planned authoritarian societies. The rulers want people to be kept in the dark, not knowing what's real and what's fake, so that they couldn't act on, so don't challenge the system. Am I making sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so it's just you have. I believe that's where if you're. I don't want to sound elitist, but if you're educated well enough, you get to discern these articles, and you say, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, something doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That actually it makes a lot of sense to be honest when you think about it. But something that the place I was kind of leading us to there was these things like major documents being, I don't even know if it's called they're being leaked anymore. I think they're just being released. But how can we tell some of these documents are real? Like things like they say they're going to bring out the JFK files or the Epstein list, or I know there's been lots of things like blueprints for like historic architects and stuff like that. Is there any way to tell when these are real or not? Because these documents are held at such a high standard, you kind of have to almost, you can't really believe them at first take.
Well, that's just it. Uh, you have you have to be very careful about who brought this to your attention, this document to your attention, what are their sources, and how this person got this document in the first place, and why is he handing you this document? And those are questions we have to ask, and that's what good journalists should do: ask questions.
Yeah, they will have all the answers before you even have to question them.
Mm. And all of a sudden, and you know that the news story came out about figures in the in the Trump administration on a group chat talking
Yeah.
about. I mean, that was a state secret. That group chat, and they used it on a regular commercial, general public app. And how did Jeffrey Goldberg get on that? Get on that?
Yeah, that goes to like what I mentioned at the beginning. How does that get out? Do you think there's maybe a plan to get that out? Maybe I don't want to say they meant it, but maybe someone had set it up in a way so someone would get the information and it would be leaked.
Hmm. That's been known to happen. For some person following a certain agenda would pass on leaks of information to a journalist, and what, like I said, motivation. Why would they leak it? Is it to attack another person, or is it to actually show that there's problems within that agency? Yeah, like the old Watergate scandal, and the stories about Deep Throat, the guy who leaked to Woodward and Bernstein the information about the scandal. And he said, "Follow the money." That's a good rule. But who was Deep Throat, and what was that guy's or that person's motivation to pass this info along?
Yeah. The last thing I want to ask, well, actually, I have two things I want to ask because it seems in every industry there's almost unwritten rules. It's not against the law. It doesn't, but I wouldn't say it doesn't hurt anybody, but it can have consequences, but it's not totally rolled out, but you just kind of shouldn't do it. Is there unwritten rules for journalism?
Well, I believe the rules, the guidelines are pretty obvious. Like I say, get the facts straight, get your information correct, and like I say, have evidence to back you up. That's the only rule I can figure out.
The last thing I have to ask you, because this is what the main reason I brought you here for, is because the news is such a topic that people don't really know how to question it. But the big question is always, of our day to day, where we see things that come up on the news, we see the headlines, we see the fancy articles, we see video evidence of things like that. How much of the news is actually real?
That's a good question. I wish, unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I mean, mostly it would come from an established source that is known for its reliability. But a lot of the new media outlets like Midas Touch, apparently they're doing quite well. Like just second to Fox News in viewership. So it might, like I said, it'll depend on the background of the reporters, the news people, and like the anchor person. I mean, was this guy a veteran, reliable journalist with a long track record, or is he some guy who used to sell used cars? I mean, you have to. I mean, that's a question. I mean, the quality of the people behind the journalists and editors and all that.
Before you go, John, is there anything you would like to promote?
For me?
Yep, I know you're desperate to get that book up.
Okay, this is my novel. I'm working on another one, follow-up novel, Soldier of the Cross. And it's available on KDP Amazon. And as a union man, I feel a responsibility. Since I'm published on Amazon, I feel the need to support organizing efforts for Amazon employees. As to the novel, it deals with the phenomenon of TV evangelism and the old religious right movement, which under the cover, under the cover of Christian, is an effort to restore a dominant class's power. But it's at a personal level. My character, David Lucas, starts off as a bad news kid in the early 60s, drunk court chaser, school bully. And he gets in trouble in the army. He comes out of the army, a born again Christian, just wants to be a fanatical, manly man for Jesus. But how he goes about it lands him in trouble. That's all I'm going to say about it. So please look it up. And I hope you help out too. Soldier, it's kind of better. Soldier of the Cross on Amazon.com.